Okay. I think we're live. Look at that. All right. Oh, I'm missing something. Give me a moment. I need some l'chaim. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dbarei.
Amen.
L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim.
Amen.
Oh, goes down just like water. Yeah. So, has anybody ever felt that they were on top of the mountain? Whatever a great achievement in some area in life, whether, whether in business, whether socially, whatever, personally, and you feel like you're on top of the mountain and you've achieved, and all of a sudden, there you are, right at the bottom. Top of the mountain, and then like somehow you got to the bottom. You kind of, whether in that area specifically or something else, how's that happen? Why does that happen? How could it happen? You're at the top of the mountain. Everything seems to be, running smoothly, perfectly, right? And all of a sudden, somehow, things just slip up. So let's understand that idea, and of course, how we can prevent such a thing. And more importantly, how we can learn something from the Parsha, because of course, that's where we go with all of this, that will empower us even in greater ways. Okay. So, many mitzvahs in this week's Parsha Ki Tetzei. One of the mitzvahs, it's an interesting one. It's about a home that a person owns, occupying at least, and that you need to build a fence on the roof. You have a roof that is accessible. I mean, if you don't have a roof that is accessible, then you don't have a problem, right? If no one's going there. But if you have a rooftop that is accessible and it may be dangerous, we have an obligation. We have to build a fence. Let us take a look. Hold on. What I just did there. Do this right. All right. Okay. So in this week's Parsha, Kisivne Bayis Chadash, when you will build a new house. Basisa Michael Gagecha. You shall make a guardrail for your roof. So that you shall not cause blood to be spilled in your house. When falls, should fall from it from the roof. That's positive commandment in the Torah. You have to build a guardrail. And as the second part says, because God forbid something tragic could happen. So, as the Sepharno says, so that you shall not cause blood to be spilled in your house. If someone were to fall, make sure that you are not in any way at fault. So the bloodshed should not be attributed to your home. Right? In other words, we bear responsibility. So take responsibility, make sure that, in fact, everything is a-okay. Simple enough, would we admit? Easy mitzvah. Easy mitzvah that we can fulfill as the Torah dictates to us. So, the Talmud from here learns out a similar principle for other potential hazards that might be in the home, might be dangerous pets, a shaky ladder, a fence around the pool, railings on balconies, not just on top of the roof. You got to put locks on your medicine cabinet, that someone shouldn't get there, that shouldn't get there. So the halachic code tells us that this law applies whether it's on the roof or any dangerous thing liable to cause a fatal accident. For example, if someone has an empty pit in their courtyard, must make a wall 10 tvachim, anywhere from 30 to 40 inches, based on different measurements of what a tefach is, or to make a cover for it so that a person does not fall into it and die. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this particular mitzvah is that there's a bracha that you make for erecting a micah. And here's the bracha. When you make the guardrail, the following blessing is recited: Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu l'aseh micah, that we're sanctified with the commandment us to construct a guardrail. We make such a bracha. So we need to understand, why exactly are we making this bracha? Because we don't always make a bracha. For example, negative commandments, we don't make blessings, for not to do something. And even positive commandments, there's certain parameters for those things that we do make a blessing. Here, what are we doing? This is an act that's intended to prevent danger. So even though there's an action involved, but it is only to prevent a danger. So Maimonides says in Mishnah Torah, in the laws of brachas, blessings are not recited over an obligation that was instituted because of danger. So many reasons for this. The reason that you don't make a blessing over something that may be an obligation to remove because of danger, because a blessing is only seen suitable when, remember, that's a rabbinic law, making a blessing is only suitable upon actions that are joyous and uplifting, but not for negative reasons, to mitigate a danger. So why would there be a blessing recited about putting up a fence? Seemingly it's only for protection. That's the first question. Question clear? All right. Good. Furthermore, if you recall in the mitzvah that we had, let's go back for a moment. Oh, no. When you build a new house, you shall make a guardrail. What does it mean, a new house? Is it limited only to a new house? What if you you bought a house. It's an old house. Why doesn't the Torah just say a house? So the Sifri says new. Rabbi says that you must make a fence from when the house is made anew. In other words, for you, it's new. You just bought it. It could be a 150-year-old home. It doesn't matter. For you, it's new. You have a responsibility. In other words, with the purchase of the home, it is anew to you. So it's to the individual, the newness of it. Even if you're not planning to move into the house, it doesn't matter. It's new to you. You have a responsibility to make this guardrail. Which is, by the way, just as an aside, the Torah, remember, is a 3,300-year-old teachings. Now, of course, we know it's divine. It's Hashem's teachings, but yet, think about it for a moment. 3,300 years ago, that there was a sensitivity in any form of law that, you purchase a new property, you have to safeguard it, that no one should, be in a dangerous position, that everybody should be, at harm's length, and you have a responsibility for that. Just think about that for a moment. Like, what kind of law was there back then that went to, that obliged people to be concerned for others? And remember, this is your own property. It's not public. If it was public property, then you understand that, the public is responsible, or whoever is, the governance is responsible. We're here talking about your private property. It's my property. I can do whatever I want. No, Torah comes and says we need to be sensitive and we have to care, right? Okay, so it's new for you, but is that completely satisfying the answer of the Sifri of the Medrash? The Torah could have still said, when you build a house, why does it have to say new? It doesn't need to say new. I can just say when you build a house, any house, whatever house, or when you acquire a house, even better. So we need to understand this idea of new. Okay. Now, very important. In Torah teachings, there are many layers of understanding things. There's the pshat, simple understanding. There's Torah has to inspire us also on many different levels. It has to inspire us psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. It's multi-level, right? So we need to find out what is the significance of this concept of offense. So there is a very profound spiritual significance to this mitzvah. Firstly, although COVID may be COVID may not be so what's the word I'm looking for? Such a big deal today as it was. Okay, there's a Delta variant, so we still need to be careful. And yet, what COVID has really taught us a lesson is in how vulnerable we are as humans, right? We're very vulnerable physically, but if we are vulnerable physically, we're also very vulnerable spiritually. A concept that we've learned many times, that everything in the physical world evolves or devolves from the spiritual. So if we're vulnerable in the physical, that means there has to be a vulnerability also in the spiritual. It can't just be in the physical. It has to be also in that manner. right? Which is the idea of, we could be on top of the world, and yet we're vulnerable. We can fall. We can fall. And where do we see this concept? We see it by the Talmud tells us about Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Yochanan was the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. You know how many years? 80 years he served. It's a long time, 80 years. And we're talking about a high priest. What does a high priest go Yom Kippur into the Holy of Holies? And in the Holy of Holies, where's that? On top of the world, on top of the spiritual world, at least. And he was there year after year. For him to be there year after year, we have to understand, means he was a very holy person. Because there was a time period that year after year, every Kohen Gadol passed away on Yom Kippur. Why? Because they weren't holy. They didn't have the proper thoughts. They weren't up to the job. We actually had a class on this about a month ago, speaking about this idea. But anyways, after 80 years of serving as the high priest, Kohen Gadol, he ultimately, he went off the path. He became a Sadducee. He went off the path. So great people. Yochanan ben Kohen Gadol was even a righteous person. And yet he was on top of the world, but fell down and fell to a very low place. How can that be? How can that happen? How is it that virtuous people like him and others can fall so low? So something that we all know because we've learned Tanya, we've learned together, as Tanya teaches us, we have two souls. We have a godly soul and we have an animal soul, a natural soul, right? And there's a battle between the two, of course. And it could be that sometimes we are, engaged with one soul, and yet we're not affecting the other one. The other one becomes untouched. In other words, we can do a lot of good. You can have your day full of good, right? Full of positive things. But that doesn't mean that your base nature has changed. That doesn't mean that you've transformed a character quality in your very soul and very being. So, in other words, one of the things that the Rebbe has, has encouraged, requested of his followers, so many different things, whether it's for those learning Rambam now, 3 chapters of Rambam, that takes up a part of your day. Do Chitas, Tillim, Chumash, Tillim, and Tanya every day, and to learn it properly, and all of the other things you need to learn. And then you have to do outreach. It's not enough that you learn for yourself and do for yourself. You have to be there for others and bring other people close to Torah and mitzvahs. Your day could be so full, and yet that doesn't mean you really changed yourself from within. So much so that base nature, can rear its ugly head and come back. And this is what the Alter Rebbe shares in Tanya. Let me share here with you. Now the Rebbe says, yet, inasmuch as the evil in one's heart's left part of the Beinoni remains within its innate strength, craving after all the pleasures of this world, one should not consider himself immune and should not accept the world's opinion. which would have him believe that the evil in him has been dissolved by the good, which is the rank of a tzaddik, a righteous person. Rather, in his own estimation, he should consider himself as if the evil in his is at full strength in the left part, as from birth, and that nothing of it has ceased or departed. On the contrary, with the passing of time, it has gained strength because the person has indulged it considerably in eating, drinking, and other mundane pursuits. Even one whose whole aspiration is in God's Torah, which he studies day and night for its own sake, this is still no proof that the evil has been dislodged from its place. Rather, it may still have its essence and substance are in full force. And this we can understand why in Tanya, if you remember in the first chapter, that Rabbi, who was the leader of Jewry in his time in Pumbedisa, which is modern day Iraq or Iran, somewhere there. He was the leader of the Jewish people in the time of exile. And so much so that the angel of death, that it was time to bring him upstairs, couldn't, because he was so busy doing good, learning, focused every moment on divine pursuit. And yet, Rabbi, he called himself only a Beinoni, not a righteous person. He called himself only a Beinoni, not a righteous person. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya. But an intermediate person, it is, by the way of the example, similar to a sleeping man who can awaken from his sleep. So is the evil in the intermediate person dormant, as it were, in the left part of the heart during the recital of the Shema and the prayer, Amida, when his heart is aglow with love of God. But later it can awaken up again. For this reason, Rabbi considered himself as though he were a Beinoni, though his mouth never ceased from studying, and his desire was in God's Torah day and night, with a passionate craving and a longing of soul yearning for God, with overwhelming love, such as experienced by when reciting Shema and the Amidah. Hence, he appeared in his own eyes like an ordinary person who prays all day. So this is Rabbi, who sees himself as merely, he's the leader of the generation. If you recall in chapter 1, Abaya, his student, says to him, well, if you're only a Beinoni, then we're all lesser than you, then, we're all wicked. We're all a Rasha. So how could he see himself that way? Because he was so busy doing good, he didn't know. Did he transform any negative qualities in his character or not? Might still be there. So therefore, he was on guard. He considered himself merely a Beinoni. Now, so what does this mean? As much as we grow and we attain greater levels of connection and goodness and greatness, ultimately, going up that spiritual ladder, we should never feel that we have a spiritual immunity. We need to know that we're vulnerable. We need to know that we're vulnerable. That's why we say in our morning blessings, bring us not to sin, neither to transgression, nor to fall from grace. May we never have to never have a test to face, nor ever to disgrace through failing in the test. Why? Because we're vulnerable. Now, with that notion that we're all vulnerable, and it's possible that, the animal instinct in us, the negative character qualities that we may have are there, even though, again, we're engaged in so much good. But we need to make an honest assessment. And what do we need to do? You need to make a proper boundaries to make sure that those qualities, those negative qualities, shouldn't come to the fore, right? That we're at risk Because we all know where we're vulnerable, where we have things that are, needs improvement, and we need to create the proper boundaries. This idea we get from the Nazir. The Nazir is the individual who takes upon himself to abstain from worldly pleasures of wine and the like. And so the sages caution him, don't even walk by a vineyard or a winery, for sure not. Right? Don't go that way. Go around if you have to, in order that you shouldn't be tempted. In other words, create the boundaries, the proper boundaries in your life that are necessary. Because we all have certain qualities that are, that we need to safeguard from ourselves, that we shouldn't cross over. And therefore we need the proper strategies. Now, one of the, hats that I wear, this is my Talmudic cap, thanks to Liba Davida. But I wear another cap. One of the things I do is I run a crisis addiction center called Chabad Lifeline, people with addiction issues. And the willpower that you need to have in order to overcome addiction, the commitment you need to have is unbelievable. But together with that is creating the proper boundaries, knowing that this is a problem. So you need to have the proper boundaries in place. Who you are friends with and where you hang out, right? You might say, well, I've made the resolve and I can control myself. That might be a very foolish thing. And we need to be able to create the proper boundaries. So this is the concept the Alter Rebbe calls tshuva hageder. Tshuva, penitence that creates a fence. That's distancing yourself from those things that might tempt you to in an area that we are vulnerable. And we're all vulnerable. So we might be vulnerable, in other words, in human relations, like a button's pushed that really upsets me. Someone says something, or a loved one says something to me that touches an insecurity. That's a vulnerability. So being aware of that, so the Alter Rebbe says we need to create that fence, knowing that that button could be pushed, and that it shouldn't come to that, because since I haven't perhaps worked that through and worked on the refinement of that particular issue, you need to create the fence. At the same time, you have to work on it, but very important that we create that fence. So for example, like the Alter Rebbe says, or the sages in the Talmud tell us, that if a person has fallen prey to a certain thing in life, like they didn't eat kosher, so a person shouldn't say, well, I'm strong, I can overcome that, and not a problem. I'm only not eating it because God says. Well, if you fall in prey and it still might be an issue for you, so you need to create the proper fence, right? Not to go to a place where you're going to have drinks and this and that, and then there might be things that are not whatever. Everybody knows what it is. So we need to create those boundaries. But those are regular boundaries in life that we need to create. Our Torah portion is also speaking about boundaries, also speaking about a fence, but it's speaking about a different level about the fence. Vulnerabilities we all have. We all have certain buttons that get pushed in our lives that we need to be aware of, and to create a fence that it shouldn't come to that. So something, you need sometimes to already have the conversation in your head that when someone says something that brings up one of my insecurities, so I need to be able to say to myself something, right? So like someone who's short and they're insecure about their being short, right? Or someone who's overweight and they're insecure about that, or whatever, So you need to create a boundary around that. Now, what are you going to do? Not speak to anybody that might be 6 inches taller than you? You can't do that, right? That's not the kind of boundary you're going to create. But to create the kind of boundary that will give you the capability that if someone does, pick on that you'll have a conversation that you'll be able to deal with. But that's, again, regular stuff that we all need to be aware of in our lives in order that we can, not cross where we shouldn't cross. But our Torah portion is speaking on another level. Now, when it speaks about, of course, as we mentioned earlier, speaking about a house. So there's not just a house of brick and mortar. There's other types of houses that are of the human kind. And what's that? Actually, our very body is a house that houses my soul. It houses my intelligence, my emotions, conscious awareness. So the body is considered like the home. And that's what the Rebbe says in this week's Sikha. Sometimes the word house can refer to the person's body, right? So now, and of course, what comes into there is not only that we have intelligence and emotion, but our godly soul is also housed in this body, right? And ultimately, the godly soul doesn't come into the body for its own sake. It doesn't need refinement. It doesn't need to be elevated, but it comes there for the body. The body is unrefined. It needs work. It needs to be elevated. So that's what the home, that's what the house is. But now in our mitzvah, what are we talking about? We're not talking about just any part of the house. We're talking about the rooftop, right? The rooftop. So what would that represent? In me, the body being the house. Anybody? Any thoughts on that? Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, if you cause somebody to fall, they can, in essence, if God wants them to fall, that could be up to God. Why should they can create their own?
Wait a second. Wait. You're not answering my question. I don't mind.
Why would you?
I don't mind that you have a question. I don't mind that you have a question, but
No, it's not a question.
don't be so Jewish on me. And from my question, ask me a question. Respond to my question, please. I'm asking this. If the house here that we're talking about is the metaphor for the body, what is the metaphor then of the rooftop of the house?
Soul,
Your mind.
the head.
Okay, it's not the soul and it's not the mind.
Okay.
Good tries. I mean,
Your
soul, it's not because it's not the rooftop, right? What? Sorry, I didn't catch anybody. The video
Your
you said.
potential.
Sorry. Say
Your
again.
potential.
No, we're talking about the body here, folks. What's the top of your body? I mean, not physically top of your body, not your head. Yes. Huh?
Soul.
No, no.
Your skin.
Not physically. Think about, you know what it is? It's your ego.
Oh.
We're not talking about soul now. So you say top of the soul might be faith, might be your divine intelligence, right? We're talking about the body now. The tallest part is the rooftop. The tallest part of the body is ego.
Right.
Okay. The human ego can be very dangerous. It can easily fall off the edge on top of the roof and a slippery slope all the way to the bottom. In other words, arrogance, pride, which comes from self-absorption. This is what it means at top of the roof. This is the ultimate vulnerability that we have. The other things, and it might be, and as a source of all of the other things that we spoke about before, that we all have certain things, weaknesses, things that we're vulnerable, that we need to create a fence. But here comes the Torah, and it's coming this week's Parsha, and coming and tell us that you're on the top. You're on top of the world. What makes you feel on top of the world? It's your ego. Right? So Torah is telling us you need to put appropriate boundary. You need to put up a fence. Otherwise, you're going to fall. Right? Sorry. Let me get. And here it is. The Shalah says, and you shall make a guardrail for your roof. I found an allusion here. Since the roof is tall, the Torah is alluding to the notion that one should impose limits on his haughtiness. If not, then that will be his downfall. For the one who falls will fall from it. As it is stated, before the destruction comes, pride, and before stumbling, a haughty spirit. Magi develops a similar explanation. And says, and you shall make a guardrail for your roof. According to the literal reading, it should have said, and you shall make a guardrail for its roof. I mean, your roof. Referring to the house that was built. The meaning then is this: make a guardrail for your roof. That's to say, the boundary for your roof, namely on your greatness. That your heart should not be too haughty. So we need to make limits for the ego that we have. And when we're on top of the world, right? When we're on top of the world, great success, then of course, very likely, or very possible at least, that it goes to our head, right? That's the idea over here. And therefore we need to make that precaution and have proper perspective that we're not invincible. We're not, so superior. We need to create a fence around the Torah, around ourselves, sorry. We have to be careful at that moment. Actually, it's at the moment of great success is when we need to do that. Because that great success usually engages the ego and the feeling of greatness. Top of the world. You're on top of the roof. That's when you might really fall. Okay. Now, so with this, we can appreciate that there's in Torah, there's a negative commandment of that you shouldn't stand idle by the blood of your brother, which means anything that might be dangerous. We have a responsibility to remove that danger. And that's something we spoke about earlier, right? But to remove a danger is no reason to make a blessing. So over here, we're removing a danger. Metaphorically, your ego, but that's not a reason to make a bracha. Yet we have a positive commandment here that we should make the guardrail. So the positive commandment, right, means that there has to be something positive that comes out of it. In other words, it's not just merely a protective measure. In other words, when you've accomplished something great in your field of work, or your field of as a professional, or you've accomplished something great in the community, right? You've done something glorious and you're on top of the world. And now you got to be careful. Don't let it get to your head. And therefore you're going to be full of yourself because you might fall. Fine. We get that. But this is not just, that's all the negative side of it. There has to be something positive here. It can't just be, a protective measure that something negative shouldn't happen to me. But I'm on top of the world now. How is that going to translate in just to protect it? Is there something good and positive that can come from this? So the idea of Micah, the simple idea is, it's just a protective measure. So, in a literal sense of making the fence that no one should hurt themselves. And likewise, as the Maggid says, it says your roof, meaning my body being the house and I'm top of the roof, I'm top of the world. My ego now feels a wonderment, greatness. So now create this protect. No, it's got to be more than that. There has to be something positive that's going to become over here. Is that clear what I'm saying? I didn't say what it is, but the point that I'm making. It can't be just a protective measure that I shouldn't fall and through my success now make it into a failure. There has to be something positive that I'm top of the world and I'm, that I now have to rein in that feeling. So it's positive over here. So first of all, how do you create? How do you create that boundary that it shouldn't get to your head? What creates that? Anybody? What creates the boundary that you're on top of the world, great achievement? Yechanemin's Kohen Gadol, 80 years, right? Great achievement. And not to fall. What creates the fence? What do I do to create the fence?
Humility.
Humility, right? Thank you. Humility.
Is it reminding yourself that it came from Hashem?
Well, that's a humility, right? In other words, in the great achievement, who doesn't want to take credit? If not full credit, at least partial credit, right? But with humility, right, you're able to put aside, you're going to now not allow you to, be overridden with your sense of greatness, right?
Right. I think the person who took over Yochanan's soul was somebody who had repented, and he had been an evil person, and
right.
So you can go from the bottom to the top too.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's what, but we're talking for ourselves right now. We're not talking about how to, that's a good point, and perhaps we can touch on that later. But what does humility do? So I'm on top of the world, great achievement, right? What does the humility do? That at that moment, is the humility just sort of like in order that I shouldn't fall? So there's like a false humility. It's like, like the Torah says you need to be humble, but if you're really great, so, they tell the story of the great Torah scholar was not a Hasidic Jew, and he would go Friday afternoons into the mikvah and going around with a scrubby, can I scrub you back? Can I scrub you back? Like to act humble, because Torah says you need to be humble, but you're great. How do you act humble?
Recognizing Hashem.
Okay, but you're great. You achieved your Torah knowledge. You worked hard. You achieved, right? So then there was this chassid who went around also Friday afternoon. Can I scrub you back there? So the guy looks at him and says, "Who are you that you think you can do this?" In other words, that's not real humility. Real humility is truly a sense of what? I think, Alice, you said it. A sense of recognition that God gave me the power. He gave me the strength. He gave me the know-how. Okay, I put a little here and there together, but really, it's not about me. Ego, it's all about me, right? Humility is that it's not all about me. What does it mean it's not all about me? Right? Remember the story of the guy who goes out with the girl and he's really achieved so much in his life, and truly. And for 2 hours, he's talking about his great achievements. After 2 hours, he says to the girl, "It's enough about me talking about myself. Tell me, what do you think of me? Is this guy ready? Is he marriage material? No. Why not? He's haughty, too full of himself, and truly achieved. I'm not a bluffer. He really achieved. So why? I mean, if you truly achieved, so then why? If you got it, flaunt it. So why not flaunt it? How come? Why not? Come on, tell me.
It's not our Kodak moment, as you said this morning.
What?
It's not our Kodak moment. Every Kodak moment is God's Kodak moment. We have nothing to do with it.
But come on, I really, achieved great stuff. Did amazing things. I mean, explain. No, I'm not going to let you get away easy. I'm sorry. You got to explain. You have to understand this.
Well, but Hashem was a partner, I guess. You have to recognize that.
Okay, so he's a partner, but I'm also. I'm also. Okay. So he's a senior partner. I'm a junior partner. But hey, don't take away my credit. Don't take away my achievements.
No, I don't know. We'll have to ask
Why
Moshe.
not? Why not? Come on.
Well,
No. Why is that guy not marriage material? Come on, tell me. What does marriage mean? No one's married, I guess. Marriage means that it's not about me. It's about you. There's room for you. If I am so full of myself, there is no room for you. There's only room for you as much as you will fill me more. But that's not room for you. You I'm not interested in. I'm only interested in how you fill me more. You add to my ego. You just inflate me more and make me feel better and bigger. Bigger fall in the end. It's a bigger fall off the roof. Someone who has humility means that I'm bored with myself. There's room for you.
like God when he created us.
I am not, I don't need to make it about me. I don't have to talk about me. I don't have to make me significant through, letting you know more about me. There's why? Because what I really want is to connect to you. So the more I am full of myself and truly like a real Torah scholar, a real great achiever who's done a remarkable stuff. But the point of it is there isn't room for another. They're on top of the roof, alone. And they're gonna fall. And there's other people picking them up even higher, higher, and higher. They're gonna fall. humility, making that boundary, is then really allowing you to connect to another. That can be really another person in your life. Not just someone's boosting you up, picking you up. That's not a real person then in your life that there's space for them. So the humility allows then that person to enter, to be a part of your life in a real way, in a meaningful way that you can truly connect. It's not about you. There's room for them. And the more the humility, the more there is room for them, the more there is a capability to really connect to the other. And ultimately, to be able to connect to God. Right? So the more I deflect, truly believing that it is, as Alice, you mentioned, it's from God. God gave me the power, he gave me the strength, he gave me this, he gave me that. And truly believe, right, that it is God. So I'm just thankful to him. So then what does that mean? I created a boundary now. That boundary wasn't just that I shouldn't fall off, but that boundary now allowed me to access God and to have him part of this. As opposed to kind of excluding him, right? Because recognizing that he's the one who gave me all of this. So what am I doing? So that in the boundary that I've created, what I've done is just not only prevent that I shouldn't fall off, but now in the boundary, I've now been able to include somebody in that boundary of my life, right? Another person. I've been able to include God within my life. Not that we all believe in God and we know, but really include him as I'm including someone who I really care for, not just because they build me up, but I care for them as them. So I care for God as God, not because he is the one that, is the source of all of everything that I need from him. This is what the Micah is teaching me. So either I can get blown up and full of myself and make a mistake, as the Rebbe says, that I don't need anything else, right? What does the ego tell me? I don't need anything else. I'm the achiever. So that the Rebbe says in the Sicha, so that no creature will ever make the mistake of thinking that they have no need for the creator and the ruler of the world, which is higher than them. God created them with a deficiency in their being, one that cannot be, that they cannot feel themselves. As a result, they sense that they are dependent on God. In other words, let's take it a step further. The deficiency that I have of my ego, right, that thinks all I have, that I can accomplish and I can fulfill all and I can do all, I have to create the boundary, which is that humility. That humility now recognizes that I'm dependent on others. I need others to connect to, and I need God, ultimately, that I'm dependent on him. So God doesn't give us the capacity to have it all, because if I would have it all, I would be an inflated ego and I wouldn't connect to others. I wouldn't need them because I can accomplish it all myself. I can do it all myself. So God gives us an ego that we have to put a fence around in order that I can now, in my world, have others. Through the humility, I'm dependent on others. When God created us, what did he do? He said, let us make man. Let us make man. God's making man. Who's us? He made himself vulnerable to angels, to the souls, actually, to souls and angels, and said, come, be a part of this. Did God need? God doesn't need. He doesn't need them. But it's teaching us a lesson of being vulnerable, right? To include others. So the ego doesn't need. But when we recognize that that's my ego talking, so with humility, I'll make space for another. God made space. Let us make man. So we make space with our humility that we can incorporate others and have others in our lives. And in here that we are recognizing that we're dependent on God. So this is what the Micah is teaching me. Top of the world, great accomplishments. And that ego then will bring me to a place where I feel that, hey, I've done it all. Create a fence because you're going to fall and you're going to fall hard. Create a fence. The fence is of humility. Humility means a boundary, that you create a boundary. You recognize that, hey, the greatest vulnerability I have is my ego. It has the biggest falling, but from that ego, that I recognize that I think I have it all and I am all, that now by creating that fence, it allows me to recognize that, no, I need another. Whether I need another in my life to share my life, that's what it means in marriage. I need you in my life because a life alone is not a life. I need you in business because I know that my ego might tell me that I could do it all, but my humility tells me that I need to create you within my boundary, within the fence here to be, because I need your great qualities that can help to bring this business to where it needs to go. I need a fellow Jew. That I need a fellow Jew that, even though maybe, your capability or a simpleton, you are a great achiever, you've achieved much in Jewish life. And this guy's, a nebuch. Now, so the ego will say, I can manage without him. I don't need. Humility will come and then say, no. Let me create a boundary that will incorporate this person. The ego will separate the person from you. The boundary will create now, from the humility, will create that now this person can be also part of your world. And you can connect to that person and uplift them and give them something that's meaningful that they can, that you make yourself vulnerable to them, that they will accomplish and we'll get the credit for it. And through your humility, you're so happy. That's being able to incorporate another person in your life, that they get the credit, not you. You help them, you led them that way, but they get the credit and you're so happy to give them the credit. You're so happy to pick them up. The ego won't do that. But the humility, the boundary that we create, then the ego will separate yourself from that person. It's a nebuch. What can this guy gonna accomplish? And so on and so forth, in so many different ways that this is the lesson from this week. That when we create the fence, the border, and that's why now we can understand the blessing. What's the blessing over here? There's a blessing over here. We have a negative trait of an ego that can become, right? But that ego that will exclude others and exclude God, right? Not that you don't believe in God, not that you're, feel dependent on him, but you're excluding him in that, I only include him for what I need from him, but you excluding a real intimate connection with him. Just like with another human being, to have an intimate connection with them for not for what you can gain from them, but for an appreciation for who they are, period. So here we make a blessing. Why do we make the blessing? Because in that moment that we're on top of the world, a great achievement, we could fall or we can make a fence. That fence means in that great moment, I could choose to exclude everybody and everyone, including God, and just feel, I feel great. I feel tremendous. Or we create a fence and I deflect all of that and able to include another and another and another and another in that great achievement of mine, and ultimately to include God. Ultimately including God and recognizing that that's where the great achievement is. And then I won't fall. And not only won't fall, but I've actually now accomplished something remarkable. And that is deserved of a blessing. Is that clear? Any questions on this? Powerful idea. No questions? It's that simple. All right. Amazing then. All right. Thank you all for joining. Leslie and Heather and Trig and Sharon and Michael, Yeti, Andrew, Davida, Alice, Celia, Katie, Liba, Irma, Diane, Robert, Yocheved. All right. Beautiful.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye, fine.
Thank you,
Thank you,
folks.
Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
you.
Be well.
Very
All
good
the
time.
best.
Enjoyed
Thank
that.
you,
God bless
Rabbi.
you all.
Fine.
Thank you. Thank
Rabbi
you.
Tov, everyone.
Shavua tov, a good tov. Be well.
See you tomorrow.